The episode begins in a wasteland where the moon covers the sun, causing an eclipse. Lightning strikes around the eclipse, and it strikes a dead tree in the wasteland. Its roots begin to move, and the tree rises. The moon moves away from the sun, and an evil being named Aku stands. He turns around and says he can smite the world as he did in the old days. In a city, the emperor tells the story of Aku's attack to his son Jack. He says he was young when Aku attacked and remembered the story of 3 ancient monks who lived at the top of a mountain. He goes to the monks, who help him create a magical sword he uses to defeat Aku and his demonic forces. The emperor walks away as he tells Jack to beware of evil, and Jack picks up a wooden stick and begins practicing. A strange shadow falls on the city, and the warning bells ring. Aku attacks, and soldiers attack him using their weapons. He shoots lasers at them from his eyes. The emperor rushes to retrieve the sword, but Aku grabs him. He instructs his mother to take Jack and the sword and begin their plan. They escape on a boat as Aku takes over their town and enslaves everyone. The emperor's mother places Jack on a large ship and disappears into the fog. The captain consoles Jack and begins teaching him. They arrive at a city, and the king takes Jack. He teaches him how to ride a horse, and they ride into the desert, where they meet an African man who teaches Jack how to fight. Jack learns to fight, and the man takes him to the Egyptians, who teach him several things. Jack makes his way to Roma and improves his skills. He rides through the forest and encounters an archer who he greatly impresses. He trains with an ancient tribe of monks, and once his training is complete, he makes his way to the top of a mountain, where he meets his grandma. She presents him with the sword and a uniform, and he realizes he is ready. In Jack's hometown, Aku forces everyone to serve as slaves, and the emperor pushes a large totem. A demon guard tells him to go on break, but refuses to let him drink water. He tries flogging the emperor, but Jack stops him. He fights several demons and easily defeats them. The emperor explains that Aku is using the town's resources to grow stronger. Jack swears to use the sword to kill him, but his father calms him. He tells him to let the sword lead him, and Jack rides away, searching for Aku. He gets to Aku's tower, enters, and screams his name. Aku emerges and says no mortal can defeat him. Jack uses the sword to cut him, and Aku remembers it. He transforms into a monster and fights Jack, but Jack fights back. He prepares to kill Aku, but Aku opens a strange portal and sends him into the future. Jack screams as he moves through the portal. Jack falls from the sky into a futuristic world. Several cars fly around and he lands on one. He moves on the cars, and one of them begins shooting him. Jack jumps to it and destroys it as he gently makes it to the ground. A large machine moves to him, and he climbs its tire and gets out of the ditch. Some people watch as he comes out and praises him for the skills he used. He tells them he has several questions and asks who their leader is. He says he wants to meet the person, and they tell him it's impossible to meet Aku. Jack sees several billboards of Aku, and the people tell him that Aku is their leader. They inform him that he has been their leader for as long as they can remember, and suggest he gets a drink. Jack enters a strange club, and the loud music disturbs his ears. He realizes that only strange creatures are in the club, and a large lizard man hits him because he is staring. Jack apologizes, but he refuses to accept his apology and decides to fight him. Jack cuts off his arm and fights several lizard men. Meanwhile, several dogs talk to a reptilian man in a pod. They ask for his help, but he yells and steps out. One of the dogs translates what he says and says the man thinks they are crazy. They watch as Jack fights the lizard men in thick smoke, and he rips off their limbs. The dog goes to Jack and talks to him. He offers Jack a refreshment, and Jack enters the pod. He gets uncomfortable as he sits amid talking dogs. The dogs drink their drinks and introduce themselves. Ruffle, who is their leader, says that Jack is from 25 years before Aku, and that Aku wants to spread his evil reign to other galaxies. The dogs tell Jack that they are archaeologists and were searching for fossils about their past, but found a special mineral that produces energy. The waitress listens to their conversation, and they tell Jack that Aku enslaved them, stopping their archaeological work. Jack decides to help them, and they step out of the pod. They ask Jack his name, and he realizes that the people outside called him Jack, so he names himself Jack. Meanwhile, the leaves the club and makes her way to Aku's tower. In the tower, an alien race begs Aku to let them inhabit the earth because he has taken their water. Aku agrees, but instructs them to pay homage to him by erecting a statue of him every month. He chases them out of the tower, and the waitress enters. The waitress informs Aku that a warrior has arrived and threatens to free the dogs from the mines. Aku sees Jack and laughs as he sends several drones after him. Meanwhile, Jack gets on a ship with the dogs, and they take him to their camp. Ruffle says that the dogs are forced to work or will be punished. A dog informs them that Aku's drones are coming, and they see them from the top of an abandoned building. Ruffle uses binoculars to stare at the incoming drones. He says there are several drones approaching and wonders how Jack will be able to defeat them. Jack says he will need weapons, and he sits with the dogs that night and makes a plan. They teach him how to operate a pen, and after forming the plan, he explains it to the other dogs, and they get to work. Jack watches as they set their plan in motion and stares at the energy rocks. He realizes they are extremely sharp and decides to use them as weapons. Jack makes several weapons using the rocks and forms a bow and an arrow. The dogs work tirelessly as they create traps around the area. Jack sees a large creature resembling a horse and moves a carriage, which impresses him. He takes the creature, and the dogs create armor for him. He draws his emblem on a cloth, and the dogs step on it, leaving their paw print. Jack stands on a hill in his armor and prepares for battle. The following day, a dog spots the drones and informs everyone they should take cover. Jack emerges with his horse creature as the drones arrive. He activates the traps, and it begins to destroy some of the drones. He causes several explosions using oil and rocks, rides around and destroys several drones. The drones surround Jack as he fights them, and one knocks him down. They trample on his emblem, but he breaks free and begins fighting them. Jack destroys several drones as they break his armor. He jumps across a fire as the drones follow him and rushes to some traps. Jack hides behind a trap and pushes it as the drones pass. He destroys several drones and rushes to a rocket. He uses the rocket's thrusters to destroy more drones and does the same with several placed rockets. Jack runs as the drones pursue him and jumps over a ditch. The drones continue running, fall into the ditch, and get destroyed by the spikes. The surviving drones get to Jack and surround him as he prepares to fight them. He stares at them as the dogs watch from inside the buildings, and they attack him. Jack destroys the drones and dodges their attacks. They begin to outnumber him and give him several scars as he falls to the ground. He refuses to give up and stands up, ripping off his torn shirt in the process. Jack screams in anger as he destroys the drones and is covered in the oil. He defeats all the drones and stands on a pile of them as he holds his emblem. Ruffle emerges and tells him that the dogs are forever loyal to him. They tell him they will continue their archaeology, and Jack says he will find a way to defeat Aku. Aku stays in his tower and realizes that Jack is stronger. He says he and Jack will meet when he decides and laughs. Jack uses several vines to form a trap. He places bait in the trap and hides in the woods while waiting for an animal to get caught. A wild boar emerges, and as it moves to the bait, they hear a large noise. The boar runs away, and a large creature runs through the woods. It steps on the trap and triggers it. Jack realizes that his leg is attached to the vine, and the large creature drags him away. Several small people ride other creatures as they pursue the one that runs away. Jack gets on its back and stops it as it approaches a cliff. The small men thank Jack for helping them capture the creature and ask him to follow them to their village for a feast. Jack agrees as he realizes he is hungry and agrees to follow them. They tell him how their ancestors struggled to cultivate the land and say they tamed the beasts and used their strength. They arrive at the village, and Jack notices that the buildings are old. They place the apprehended beast in a building and prepare for their feast. That night, The small men sit as they eat and use the creatures as entertainment. Jack reluctantly eats the food because it doesn't taste normal. He notices that the men maltreat the creatures, and they tell him it's no different from how humans treat horses. Jack walks around and wonders why the men are so small while their buildings are so large. He sees the apprehended beast and gives it a fruit. It startles Jack as it asks him for help, and as Jack tries to talk to it, the small men arrive and drag him back to the feast while they punish it. Jack enters a strange gate and fights several creatures. He hears the beast begging for help, and as he destroys a strange orb, it gets up and its eyes glow. Jack wakes up from the dream and sneaks to the beast. It begs him to free him, and Jack does as it says. The beast sneaks around with Jack, and they arrive at a gate. Jack uses his hairpin to pick the lock, and they enter. They see the other beasts and move to a tower. Jack climbs the tower and sees one of the beasts. It shoots energy that connects their eyes and tells Jack about how the beasts had created paradise outside of technology. He says that the strange men fell out of the sky and attacked them, forcing them to serve against their will. The old beast says they must defeat the small men, or their tribe will be eradicated. Jack decides to help and makes his way to the orb. The beast watches as he climbs the tower and accidentally wakes the small men. They apprehend the beast, but Jack uses his sword to release it. The other beasts arrive, and Jack and the beast rush to the top of the tower. The beast lands on it and destroys it, severing the link it has to the beast. They stand up and fight the small men because their weapons are useless. The men get into their ships and leave the town as the beasts celebrate. The leader of the beasts thanks Jack and tells him he can find what he needs to defeat Aku if he travels north. Jack walks through the woods. He gets to a stream and drinks water. A deer emerges and he gives it space to drink beside him. They hear a strange noise and Jack gets attacked. He runs through the forest as he escapes his pursuer and sees a strange ship. Jack sees that there are several people working on the ship. The people stare at him, and Jack's pursuers emerge. They scan the area and decide to exterminate the people for breaking several rules. The people panic and run around, and the giant robots attack them and destroy their machines. Jack gets angry as he sees what the robots are doing. He fights and destroys several robots, and as he beheads one, it flies into the air and goes to alert others of their location. The people panic because their means of escape have been discovered. A man says they can ask Jack to fight the robots as a distraction, giving them enough time to escape. Jack says he is willing to help, but says he can't fly. They put him through several tests and formed a special suit for him. Jack accidentally activates the jetpack and flies into the air. He gets the hang of flying as he uses the controls on his palms. The scientists watch and send decoy drones that Jack easily defeats. The scientists have fun that night, and Jack tells them how Aku sent him to the future, and he says he wants to return to his time. The scientists tell him how they can send him into the future and instruct him to be on a pod in the shop before they reach light speed. Aku's robots arrive the following morning, and the ship launches. They reach the first blockade, and Jack goes out of the ship. The robots attack the ship, but Jack fights them. He uses his thruster to heat his sword and uses it to destroy the drones that try to enter the ship. More drones arrive and attempt to steal the fuel, but he stops them. He fights and defeats most of them, and the rest withdraw. They form a large gun, and Jack decides to abandon his return to his time to stop it. He flies to the gun and uses his sword to deflect its attack while the ship reaches light speed and leaves. The gun explodes and propels Jack back to Earth, in a strange desert land where several people trade. Jack moves around secretly while a strange figure follows him around. He compares an image on paper to a banner and enters the building. He meets a strange man who emerges and tells Jack he knows why he is there. Jack gets excited, but the man begins talking about carpets, and Jack gets confused. He stares at the symbol, and the man demands to see it. Jack shows the man the symbols, and he realizes it's from the Woolies. He takes Jack to a secret room, showing him the light of eternity. Jack reluctantly places his hand in the light, and a jewel shows. The man tells him only a man with a pure heart can possess the jewel. An explosion occurs, and Jack is separated from his sword. He fights off his attackers, and a strange woman arrives. She helps him fight the robots, and they jump out of the building. Jack follows her as they evade their pursuers, and they ride on camel-like creatures as they escape the city. Jack introduces himself, and the woman suggests they find shelter for the night. The woman introduces herself as Ikra and says her father fought Aku but lost and is imprisoned in a ring of fire. She says that there is a jewel in the desert that can help her defeat Aku and free her father. Jack says their meeting isn't a coincidence and he is searching for the jewel. He suggests that they work together to find it. The moon rises, and the duo continue their journey as they ride through the desert. They fight a worm monster that swallows Ikra, but she cuts its stomach and frees herself. The duo continue their journey on foot, and a flying monster grabs Ikra. Jack jumps on it, tames it, and forces it to release her. Jack falls into quicksand, and she helps him out using a stick. They continue running, and as the night reaches, they sit by a fire and rest. They continue their journey the next day and enter a small town where they rest. The duo continues running and arrives at a small forest. They find the jewel floating above a pond. Jack talks to the jewel and asks for its power. It tests them to see if their hearts are pure, but they fail the test, and a giant monster emerges. Jack refuses to fight it, and it strikes him with its laser. Ikra transforms into a giant and defeats the giant monster. She retrieves the jewel and breaks it as Jack celebrates. She begins laughing and transforms into Aku, revealing that she and Aku are the same person. He laughs at Jack because he deceived him, and as Jack tries to fight him, he transforms into a bird and says he will fight him when he has a way to defeat him and his sword. Aku laughs as he flies away, and Jack swears to destroy him as he screams and plants his sword into the ground. A robotic Viking army emerges. They march together and make their way to a strange tower that's in the middle of an open field. The army stops as they arrive at the entrance of the field and prepare for what lies ahead. They grip their weapons, and their leader instructs them to attack. A man blows a horn, and the army rushes out of the woods and onto the field. They make their way to the tower, but thousands of arrows emerge and hit them. The soldiers are overpowered by the arrows, and it destroys the soldiers and their artillery. The general sits on a chair in a ship and tells a man about the great tower. He talks about how his army was wiped out by arrows that fell from the sky like rain. The man asks what the tower holds that makes the general willing to lose an entire army. The general tells him that there is a magical well on the tower that can grant anyone their deepest desire. A man emerges, yells at the general, and instructs him to continue mopping the floors. Jack meets the general and asks if what he talked about is true. The general points at an island and says the tower is at its center. He thanks the general for the information, and the general asks him to reconsider going to the island because he will die. Jack refuses and says the well is his only way of returning home. He gets on a boat and goes to the island. Jack walks through the show and sees the destroyed robotic army. Jack steps on the field and an arrow lands between his toes. He moves forward again, and more arrows land between his toes. He looks at the tower and sees the 3 strange archers. They begin shooting at him and tear his shirt as the arrows pin him to a tree. An arrow moves toward his head, but Jack pushes his sword out of its sheath and splits it in half. He hides behind the tree, and several arrows hit it. Jack tries blinding the archers using the sun's reflection, but it doesn't work. He dodges more arrows as he retreats behind the tree. Jack realizes that the archers use sound to find their enemies, and he goes to meditate under a waterfall. He remembers his training with the monks, and they teach him how to use all his senses to fight. Jack realizes he has to fight at the archer's level. He blindfolds himself so he can't see and makes his way to the tower. The archers hear as Jack approaches, and they shoot at him. He dodges their attacks as he gets close to the tower. Jack jumps on the top, and the archers shoot at him. He dodges the arrows, and they deflect into each other and hit the archers. The archers revert to their normal forms as a black liquid returns to the well. The men thank Jack for saving them, and he says he wants to use the well to make a wish. They warn him that there are consequences to using the well, and say they asked it to make them great warriors. The well granted them their wish, but to their sight, and made them its personal guards. Jack gets angry as he realizes that the well is evil. He stabs the well and destroys it. He walks away as the men say he is a noble warrior who doesn't want anyone else to be corrupted by the well. Several aliens sit at a bar and they play a game where one of the aliens stabs a fork between the fingers of another. He eventually stabs the alien's hand and screams. Jack enters the bar and everyone stares at him. He walks to the counter and the bartender asks what he wants. He asks for hot water and some of the aliens get angry as they look at him. He walks to an empty table and sits down. An alien approaches him as he pours water into a cup. It tells him he is brave for coming to the bar and acting like nothing is wrong. It sticks its tongue in his cup and says he is a wanted man. The alien shows Jack his picture, and several other aliens emerge. They prepare to attack Jack, but he knocks them down with ease. Jack puts on his hat and walks out of the bar. A furry alien sees him and asks him if he is the one in the picture. It attacks Jack, and he dodges, but his hat is destroyed. It pushes him to the ground and tries to jump on him, but he pushes it over a fence and knocks it out. A strange projectile tries to hit Jack, but he dodges it. It returns to an ape-like man, and it attacks Jack. Jack dodges its attacks and eventually destroys them. A bear emerges from the woods, and a giant worm comes out from the ground. They attack Jack and try to defeat him, but he stands his ground. A man appears while riding an elephant, and Jack knocks him down. He gets angry and defeats all his enemies as he screams. Aku watches as Jack defeats his bounty hunters. He gets angry, but thinks of a way to defeat Jack. Jack defeats all his enemies, but sees that his sandal is damaged. He throws it at a picture of his face in anger. Electricity surges out of the picture and onto the sandal. It begins to form a person and eventually forms an evil form of Jack. Jack is shocked by this and asks his counterpart what he is. Evil Jack says it is Jack's anger and hatred that Aku brings to life. Jack says it isn't possible, and Evil Jack insults him as he says they should fight. A fight ensues, and Evil Jack begins to overpower Jack. He cuts him several times, but Jack fights back and cuts his hair clip. They continue fighting. They start fires as their swords clash and spread sparks. The forest burns as they fight and clash swords. Jack stares at his sword as they clash and feels bad. He realizes he shouldn't be full of anger and should be calm and stops fighting. Evil Jack asks what he is doing and he says their fight is already over. Jack says Evil Jack is a product of his range and he is no longer angry. Evil Jack tries to attack him, but he doesn't move. He begins to scream, and Jack erases him as he removes all his anger. Jack says he knows Aku is watching him and says his tricks are becoming annoying. In a strange shipyard, Jack talks to some sailors in a bar. The sailor tells him about an elusive species called the triceratops and says he caught one. He says he sailed the waters for 3 days without catching anything, but on the 3rd day, he caught the triceratops. Jack leaves as the sailor says the journey is dangerous. He gets on a small boat and begins to sail through the ocean. While sailing that night, a thunderstorm begins and the tides become violent. Jack struggles to keep his boat steady, but a wave hits him and knocks him down. He emerges from the water, but gets knocked out by a sail. Jack wakes up in the belly of a strange fish that's transparent, and he is shocked. He tries to stab the fish, but its skin appears to be elastic. Jack calms down and meditates as the fish moves through the water. It passes an underwater city, and Jack realizes the city is Oceani's. He tries to stop it, but it doesn't listen, and he accidentally steps on a panel that makes it move left. Jack realizes he can control the fish using the panels that are connected to its brain. He makes the fish move back into the city. The fish attaches itself to a suction tube that socks Jack out. He carefully moves around the strange room and accidentally enters an elevator. The elevator gets filled with water and begins going up. The water leaves the elevator, and Jack gets up. he sees the Triceratops, who asks for his name. Jack introduces himself and apologizes for trespassing, but the Triceratops welcomes him to their city. They congratulate him for surviving the journey to their city. The Triceratops tells Jack to join them for dinner and takes him to the dining hall. Jack sees the food and realizes there is sushi. He eats to his satisfaction and is happy. The Triceratops tells Jack he is the first person to make it to their city. They tell him that they once lived on the surface, but were banished to the bottom of the ocean by Aku. They then ask Jack why he came, and he says he needs a favor. They realize he wants to use their time machine, and agree to help him. The Triceratops tells Jack to eat and rest while they make arrangements. Later, they take Jack to the time machine, and he enters it. They instruct him to place his hands and feet on the lights, and he does. Jack is suddenly trapped in the room, and he asks what is going on. The sailor emerges and reveals himself to be a Triceratops. They tell Jack that he is their only way out of the bottom of the ocean, and he realizes he has been betrayed. Aku emerges, and Jack tells the Triceratops that he can't be trusted. He grabs Jack and cracks the sphere, letting water enter. The Triceratops asks Aku to fulfill his end of the agreement, but he refuses and says they will remain at the bottom of the ocean till he feels like it. They realize that Jack is right and call for reinforcements. Aku easily defeats several soldiers and transforms into an octopus. The Triceratops try to escape and take Jack along. Jack tells them he can defeat Aku and convinces them to move toward him. They hesitantly take his advice and move toward Aku. Jack is launched out of the ship, and he uses his sword to go through Aku. He goes back into the fish, and Aku says they will meet again as he escapes. The Triceratops city floats to the surface after the battle. They apologize to Jack for betraying him, and he forgives them. They ask him to request anything, and Jack has an idea. While continuing his journey, Jack gets hungry. He sits on the ground, opens a bag of seafood, and begins eating. Jack walks through a field shivering. He hears a strange sound, but tries to ignore it. Jack continues walking as the wind blows and hears the voice again. He wonders what it is, and an owl flies out of a tree. Jack pulls out his sword and runs as he hears the voice. He arrives at a burnt field and realizes that something evil has ravaged the land. Jack continues his journey on the land, and the voice calls to him. He sees several fallen warriors and destroyed battleships. He arrives at a mountain and climbs it as he sees a flicker from the top. Jack accidentally triggers several traps that lead him deeper into the cave. He uses 2 shields to block a series of spikes and continues moving. Jack dodges some steam as he arrives at more traps. He dodges them and continues going deeper into the cave. He jumps on several platforms as they sink and eventually gets to a firm surface. A rock monster erupts from the ground. Lava enters the monster and awakens it as a lava monster. The monster attacks Jack, and a fight ensues. Jack slashes the monster, and it is happy because it is facing a worthy opponent. Jack refuses to fight and says he doesn't have a reason to. The monster urges him to continue, but he refuses and sits on the ground. The lava monster tells Jack that he was once a person and is trapped in the rocks. He forms a tapestry with his history and says he made it, so he won't forget who he is. The lava monster tells Jack how he is a normal person with a family. After hunting with his tribe one day, Aku emerges and begins to attack. He destroys the village, and the lava monster, who is a warrior, tries to fight but gets trapped in a crystal. Aku traps him underground, and he eventually learns how to control the elements around him. He says he needs to battle a worthy opponent to be free, and Jack eventually agrees to fight him. Jack gets knocked down several times, but doesn't give up and continues to fight. He eventually stabs the lava monster. The monster glows and reverts to his normal form. He celebrates as he says the curse was lifted, but rapidly ages. Jack rushes to him, but he tells him not to worry. 2 Valkyries appear from Valhalla and land beside the warrior. They carry his body and take him up with them as Jack leaves. Jack walks through the field as the warrior stands beside several warriors at the gates of Valhalla. Jack arrives at several strange structures with ropes attached to them. The ropes lead to a bridge, and Jack walks to it. He sees that the bridge is extremely long and steps on it. He carefully walks on the bridge as it cracks and avoids falling. Jack stares at the beginning of the bridge, but continues walking. He walks for a very long time and takes a break that night. The part of the bridge Jack sits on begins to crack as he is asleep. He falls off it but saves himself by hanging with his sword. Jack climbs on the bridge. The next day, Jack continues walking on the bridge. He stops walking after a while as he hears a strange noise coming from far ahead of him. A strange man plays the bagpipe extremely loudly, and Jack is forced to cover his ears because of it. The man walks toward Jack and eventually stops playing. He immediately continues playing, and Jack asks him to stop. Jack asks if he is close to the end of the bridge, and the man says he still has a long way to go. Jack asks him to move so he can continue walking, but the man refuses. He says he can't take the risk of hanging on the edge because of a stranger. The man asks Jack to back up so he can pass, and Jack says it'll take too much time to go back to the beginning of the bridge. The man says Jack is rude because he feels he is superior. Jack tells the man he will hang on the edge of the bridge, but the man says he wants to look under his skirt. He says the only way Jack can cross is if they fight to the death. Jack refuses, and the man begins to insult him. He calls Jack several names and says his sword is tiny. He pulls out his sword, which is extremely long, and says it's a real sword. He attacks Jack, but Jack blocks it, and his hat gets destroyed. Jack stabs the man's bagpipes, and a fight ensues. Jack hits his sword with a special technique, but it doesn't get damaged. He informs Jack that his sword has magical runes that protect it, and they continue fighting. They fight overnight and are exhausted the following day. Jack and the man recuperate because they are exhausted. They try to continue fighting but aren't able to. Two bounty hunters suddenly emerge from both sides of the bridge. They shoot a chain at Jack and the man, and they are chained together. They both realize they are wanted men to get off the bridge before the bounty hunters get to them. They land in the water that's below the bridge, and the man asks what they'll do next. He laughs as Jack's damaged hat floats beside them. They then see his destroyed bagpipe, and Jack smiles at him. They decide to find land because the water isn't safe. Several bounty hunters move on the land as Jack and the man hide in some bushes. They move through the forest as the man tells Jack he is the most wanted man in the world. They then arrive at an abandoned town where they see several pictures of Jack in the buildings. The bounty hunters arrive at the town and gather together. They drive away as they search for Jack and the man. The bounty hunters suddenly destroy a toilet stall and find Jack and the man inside. Jack informs the man that they are extremely powerful on their own, and they think of how to break the chain that binds them. The bounty hunters shoot a missile at them, and they use it to break the chain. Jack and the man begin to fight the bounty hunters and easily defeat most of them. They work together in fighting and are able to defeat all of them. Jack stands beside the man, and they both laugh as they say they underestimated each other. They decide to buy drinks and argue about who will pay the bills. Jack enters an old-school bar. The robots sit beside the waiter, who informs them where their target is. They give him an envelope, and the host welcomes a famous singer to the stage. The singer begins singing as the audience stares at her. The robots walk to the men and pull out guns from their place of hiding. Jack sees what is happening and drops a curtain on them. They miss their targets, and Jack begins to attack them. The people in the bar run away as Jack fights the robots and defeats most of them. One of the robots uses a flamethrower, but Jack damages it and sends it flying into other robots. Some guards apprehend Jack and try to kick him out, but the men he saves stop them. They thank Jack for saving them, and their leader introduces him to his group. He tells Jack that they need someone like him in their business, and Jack asks what business they're into. Stitches explain that they make sure money moves to the right places, and Jack realizes they are into crimes. He says he doesn't want to have anything to do with them and decides to leave. The boss lets him leave and continues talking to the others. He says they have a package to deliver to Aku, and Jack overhears them. Jack returns to them and asks if they work with Aku. They tell him they do, and he says he will do anything to meet Aku. Jack apologizes, and the boss agrees to give him a shot. He says Jack has to pass a test before he gets to work with them. The boss instructs Jack to deliver a package to one of their clients who hasn't paid his protection fees. The package contains a bomb, and Jack takes it to the old man who lives with several cats. He rides away from the building, and it explodes. Jack enters a car with the boss and the others. He tells them he completed the mission, but actually informed the old man about the bomb and helped him escape successfully. The boss presents Jack in a new suit and tells the team about the plan. He talks about the Jewel of Neptune and says it controls all the water on Earth. He says that Aku tried to take it, but was stopped and defeated by the Jewel's guardian. The guardian summoned the element and made them guard the Jewel. Their plan is to enter the building and steal the Jewel so they can give it to Aku and become rich. Jack and the others move toward the building while Jack meditates. They get to a large pipe, and Jack climbs into it. He begins crawling and eventually begins to swim as the water level rises. Jack enters a large room and sees the Jewel in the middle. He moves to the stairs, and as he steps on them, it begins to glow. The elements appear. They trap Jack in the room and attack him, but he dodges. His hand gets burnt, but he doesn't give up. He continues dodging, and the element of flame insults him and says he will never escape. He dodges her attacks, and a fireball deflects on a pillar and hits the element of wind. It causes her to transform into a giant tornado that sucks the fire and earth elements. The elements get tangled, and Jack retrieves the Jewel and escapes. Stitches and the others wait for him on the boat, and he emerges with the Jewel. The boss and the others go to Aku's castle and say they have something for him. The boss presents the Jewel and gives it to him. He asks how they retrieved the Jewel, and the boss says they had help from a new member. Jack emerges and begins to attack Aku. Aku transforms into a snake and shallows Jack, but Jack breaks free. He prepares to kill Aku, but the boss and the others knock him out. Jack wakes up in their house and wonders where he is. They tell him they saved him from Aku, and Jack gets frustrated. He confesses that he deceived them into getting to Aku and says he can't be part of their gang because they are criminals. He asks for the Jewel and realizes they took it from Aku during the commotion. He takes it from them, but the boss says he'd like to return it. He lies that he wants to change, and Jack believes in him and gives him the Jewel. The boss and his gang then use the Jewel to control all the water and sell it to make money. The last episode of the season opens up with a young child named Phil dressed up as Samurai Jack, while another one of his friends dressed up as Aku. Phil pretends to attack Aku, who was about to take another innocent soul. However, before he could do that, Phil or Samurai Jack attacks him and bumps Aku's head with a wooden sword. As their pretend play ends, the boy playing Aku claims that he no longer wants to be Aku since everyone admires Samurai Jack and wants to be him. Unbeknownst to them, the real Aku watches them claiming that he has managed to terrorize the world for eons. But ever since the tales of the heroic Samurai Jack have spread, people have begun to mock him and his existence, which is why he promises to unleash an evil like never seen before, one that everyone will fear. Just then, he watches as an elderly man approaches the children and reminds them that they should not be mocking Aku. Seeing this pleases Aku, since this proves that the earlier generations had seen his wrath and know not to displease him. Aku begins to brainstorm new ways to bring about terror when a brilliant idea crosses his mind. Later that day, Aku orders everyone to gather around in a large arena where several screens are displayed. Once everyone is inside, they begin to whisper amongst themselves, wondering what Aku could possibly want. Not long after they gather, Aku appears before them and claims that he is going to tell them about a tale of epic proportions. He tells them about a universe far away, where the world was where everyone went hungry, except for the corrupt and evil monster. The monster ate all the planets that it set its eyes upon, until eventually landing on Earth. Before the monster could devour it, a mighty hero rose to protect the planet. The great warrior flew into space, where he took the monster head on. He put all of his power in his spear of truth and flung it at the monster. As the spear struck the monster, it caused him to shrivel up and turn into beef jerky. He then gave the hungry people the beef jerky to feast on. Once their hunger was satisfied, the people turned to each other and asked who they should be thanking for saving them. The great warrior stood in front of his people and unmasked himself. Once Aku finishes the story, he opens his eyes, expecting to see people celebrating him. However, much to his disappointment, they looked bored and uninspired. He summons a book of fairy tales and begins reading the first story, which turns out to be about Little Red Riding Hood. Instead of reading the story from the book, Aku closes it and begins telling another rendition of the story. He begins by narrating that there was once a little girl with flaming eyebrows, much like his own, who was called Little Red Hood. One day, her mother asked the young girl to visit her sick grandmother with a basket full of treats. A clever wolf overhears her. The greedy wolf rushes to her grandmother's house. He takes the shorter route and manages to reach there before the little girl. Not long after that, the little girl arrived at her grandmother's house and let herself in. The wolf replies by saying that his eyes are as big as his appetite before jumping up to attack her. What he did not know was that the girl had laser beams in her eyes and was well trained in hand-to-hand combat. Little Red Hood managed to take the wolf down and save her grandmother at the same time. With another story finished, Aku once again opens his eyes and finds that none of the children are amused. Annoyed, he asks them what is wrong with his stories. A brave young girl stands up among the crowd and tells Aku that, although his stories have been well told, everyone wants to hear stories of Samurai Jack. At first, Aku becomes frustrated, but then changes his mind as he realizes that he can turn Samurai Jack into a villain. For the first time, Aku notices that the children are excited. He begins narrating a story about Samurai Jack and the three bears. One day, the big bear cooked porridge for all of them. This is why they decided to go out into the woods while their food cooled down. With the bears gone, an evil Samurai Jack snuck into their house and ate the 3 bowls of porridge, not caring if it was hot or cold. Once his stomach was full, he began wreaking havoc around the house, leaving destruction in his wake. Sometime later, when the bears returned, they were shocked to find their house vandalized, with broken dishes and muddy footprints all over. When the small bear noticed that her bowl of porridge was empty, they discovered the samurai sleeping in the small bear's bed. Before Aku could finish the story, a child interrupts him and tells him that Samurai Jack would never do something like that. To everyone's surprise, Aku agrees that he had exaggerated the story, but promises to tell them another tale that was nothing but the truth. He begins another story by telling the children about a house built out of straw, wood, and brick. Inside the house lived 3 pigs. One day, they heard a knock on their door and realized that it was the evil Samurai Jack. They refused to open the door, but this did not stop the samurai as he burst through it. Again, Aku is interrupted by another child who tells him that she feels scared. Happy to hear this, Aku tells her that she should be afraid, as Samurai Jack is scary. Aku shuts him down and tells the children another rendition of Cinderella. He does not get to finish the tale as the children begin to find faults in it. Aku then tells them a mixture of all fairy tales, including Princess and the Frog, Jack and the Beanstalk, and Puss in Boots. All of the stories had one thing in common: Samurai Jack as the evil being. Tired of the children's increasing questions, Aku suddenly shuts them down and confesses that he was the wizard who attacked and took Samurai Jack down. Before any of the children can interrupt him again, he disappears. With him gone, Phil and the other children decide to retell the stories where they make Samurai Jack the hero that he truly is. Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos and make sure to subscribe and tap the bell to be notified about our latest videos. See you next time.